What is up, guys? TopTierYugioh here, and today I've got a Dogmatika control deck profile for you guys that utilizes the Dogmatika cards like White Knight, which nobody plays but is actually really good, on top of Floor and Punishment to control your opponent, while building up a board of Dogmatika monsters to keep pushing for damage. And all 4 Dogmatika monsters attacking directly actually equals 8,000, which is pretty cool. And so this is an extremely fun and versatile deck that I think you guys are going to enjoy, so let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so starting with the Dogmatika Engine, first we've got 2 copies of White Knight of Dogmatika, which is my favorite card in the entire deck. This card is just so incredible, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with the effect, the main part that we really focus on is when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can send one monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, and then look at your opponent's extra deck, and send one monster from their extra deck to the graveyard. And so that's like 2 layers of disruption in that we obviously play standard Dogmatika extra deck cards like Intis. And so they activate a card, we dump Intis and pop a card on their side of the field, and then we look at their extra deck, and we can send something from that to the grave as well, which can also disrupt their plays. Especially if you know how the opposing decks work, it's very clear what you should be sending to the graveyard in order to stop them from breaking your board. And so White Knight is just absolutely incredible, one of my favorite cards in the entire deck. And there are a lot of really cool combos of getting it out too. But after that, we've got 3 copies of Ecclesia. Of course, this is a Dogmatika deck. 2 copies of Fleur de Lis, Disruption. 1 copy of Maximus. And that's it for the Dogmatika monsters. For the spells and traps, we play 3 copies of Nadir's Servant, which again is obvious. 2 copies of Dogmatika Calamity, and this is the ritual spell that you use to summon White Knight. The cool thing about Dogmatika Calamity is that it allows you to ritual summon from your extra deck pretty much. And so you can send a card from your extra deck to the grave that equals the level of what you're ritual summoning. You just need both of them in your hand. But this is pretty cool because you can summon White Knight with a single card, with a single extra deck card, being Titanclad, which happens to be the exact same level. They're both level 8. So that's a pretty cool interaction. And then finally we play 2 copies of Punishment. So this is it for the Dogmatika Engine. The cards that are like our engine cards, I play 3 of, like 3 copies of the Ecclesia, 3 copies of Nadir's Servant. The others I play 2 of pretty much. So 2 White Knights, 2 Dogmatika Calamities, 2 Punishment, 2 Floor. And then obviously only 1 Maximus, because Maximus is just very hard to use by itself in this deck. And I guess in most decks actually, it's very difficult to just use on its own. You have to have some sort of setup for it. And because of that, I only like it at 1. Plus Nadir's Servant can just always get it from the graveyard anyways. And now before continuing with the profile, I want to show you guys a really quick, super easy combo that you guys can do with this deck, just showing how summoning White Knight by itself gets you to 2 forms of disruption. And so the way it just works is if you have the ritual spell and the ritual monster, you just activate the spell. And then with the spell, you once again dump Titanclad from your extra deck to the graveyard. They're both the same level. That allows you to summon White Knight. So then from here, this is 1 form of disruption. Now when you're in phase, you can activate Titanclad's effect. Titanclad can search a Fleur de Lis from your deck to your hand. So then you have 2 forms of disruption. When your opponent activates a card, you have White Knight, which can trigger. And then once they summon something from the extra deck, you've got Floor, which you can summon as well and then negate something on the field. So that's a really cool combo. You also can just summon Ecclesia and then search Floor. That works the exact same way. But simply summoning White Knight does get you to 2 interruptions, which is pretty cool. And now with that basic combo in mind and seeing how powerful it is, I also play 3 copies of Diviner of the Herald, because with that you can normal summon and send the fairy monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. And so we can dump Herald to the other Herald of the Arclight to the graveyard, and then Herald can search either the ritual spell or the ritual monster, so White Knight or Dogmatika Calamity. And that makes it just so much easier to get it onto the board. It also gives this deck another powerful normal summon outside of Ecclesia, and they also work very well together because you can summon your Diviner and then go into a copy of Almirage and then special summon your Ecclesia like that. But the other thing is that it sets up Maximus as well, whereas the regular Dogmatika engine I actually cannot set up a Maximus without Nadir Servant because there's no other way of getting an extra deck monster in the graveyard. But with Diviner, you can just summon that, go All Mirage, and then link All Mirage away into Secure Gardener, and then now you've got the All Mirage in the graveyard for the Maximus. And so that's a pretty cool interaction as well. And the Maximus is just busted in this deck because once you see the extra deck, you'll see that literally everything in it is great when sent to the graveyard, while also thinning out the opponent's extra deck and getting rid of some of their resources as well. And then the other cool thing about Diviner is that it's good going second as well because you can send Intis to the graveyard. And so it's really good going first and going second while also setting up your plays. It's a perfect fit in this deck. And now for the other control cards that we play, we have a small Shaddolls engine, mostly being Shaddolls Schism, which obviously gets us to Winda, very easy to get by just dumping Apkalone to the graveyard. And then we also play one copy of Shaddolls Beast. And the deck does function without this, so if you don't like it, you can cut it. But I definitely preferred it because it makes all of your Nadir Servants and punishments and anything else that sends cards from the deck to the graveyard so much stronger because you have the option of dumping Apkalone, dumping Beast, and then drawing. Like, it turns Nadir Servant into pretty much engage because you activate it, add a Dogmatika card, dump Apkalone, dump Beast, and then you get a draw. So you search a Dogma card and you also get a draw. So that's pretty powerful and without any setup either, unlike engage. But then on top of that, we're also playing 3 copies of Artifact Sanctum and then 2 copies of Scythe. So again, we have more cards to just disrupt our opponents and very powerful ones as well. Pretty much turn ending cards like Winda and Artifacts. And the other cool thing about this deck with White Knight is that you can again dump Intis to the grave. On the opponent's turn, Intis can pop Scythe and then trigger Scythe. And so Scythe actually isn't a brick in this deck. It's very easy to trigger on the opponent's turn, even without a Sanctum, by just having either Punishment or White Knight. And so really, opening up like any of these 6 cards make it very difficult for your opponent. Also, if you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel, and when you do, click that little notification bell. It really helps out a lot. Next, for the staple cards, we're playing 3 copies of Crossout Designator, 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent, and then 1 copy of Called by the Grave, because this deck really needs its combos to go through. The ceiling is relatively low, so you probably only have 1 or 2 lines of play per hand. You can't afford to have them getting stopped, so Crossout is extremely important, so is the Called by the Grave. And then Triple Tactics helps you play through Disruption, and it also helps you just draw into your disruptors, because sometimes your combos don't go through, and that's fine. But you drew Sanctum, and so your opponent can't play. And then you can just follow up on your next turn, and then just keep going from there. So I definitely like the Triple Tactics. It's also really good going second as well, which goes very well with our 3 copies of Droplets. And now Droplets I like, again, for its versatility, good going first and second, but also in that it in particular helps us ensure that our disruptions go through. And so, for example, when we're playing with artifact cards, one of the main things our opponent's going to use to negate them is Droplets. But the neat thing is that we have Crossout, so we can cross out the opponent's Droplets. So we can protect our Scythes like that. Or if our opponent has like an Imperm or something, we can use Droplets to, or maybe not Imperm, but if they have some other form of targeting negation or something like that, we can use Droplets to just send Scythe to the graveyard and then dodge their targeting negation or disruption like that. And so it's really good in just so many different scenarios, or on its own, it's another form of interruption too. So I really like Droplets at 3 in this deck because it's just extremely versatile. And then finally, to wrap up the main deck, we've got some hand traps. And for those, we've got 3 copies of Imperm, 1 Ash, 1 Veiler, and 1 Nib. And so not a lot of room for hand traps in this deck, but I feel that they're not super impactful this format, and so I didn't want to focus on them too much. But I did want to place some so that you're just not getting full comboed, but also so that you can play them with Crossout to protect yourself as well. Imperm is the main one that I wanted to max out on because it's good going first or second. It can be your 6th card and still be valuable, versus standard traditional hand traps are not valuable as your 6th card, or if you only have 1 of them against a really, really good hand. Whereas Imperm, you know, going second or having it in your hand even if you hold it can be strong. The other thing about this ratio is the 1 copy of Nib. This was kind of a tough choice because with one copy, it's not super impactful, so it could be argued that something like an Imperial Order could be better instead. But I did want to play the one copy because it is still very strong, but also sometimes you get nibbed as well, which is crazy to say in a Dogmatika deck, but there are combos that have you summoning more than 5 monsters, and so it's nice to have this for crossout as well. But that's pretty much it for the main deck, 40 cards. Also, I know how crazy this deck looks, but just to discuss how consistent it is for a minute, again, the main thing that this deck tries to do is to get out the White Knight of Dogmatika, and all we need are these 2 cards. We need a Ritual Monster or a Ritual Spell, but it's super easy to do that because we have 6 cards that search either of them. We have Diviner, and then we have Ecclesia. Both of those can search either one of these cards. We also have Maximus, which can search either one of them by dumping Herald. We have 3 copies of Nadir's Servant, which can also be a 1-card White Knight, by the way, because you can dump Herald to the graveyard. Herald has 600 attack, White Knight has 500, so you can dump Herald, search White Knight, and then Herald can search Dogmatic Calamity. So Nadir is a 1-card White Knight. Those are going to get you to floor, and then if you don't need to search any of the pieces but you have Ecclesia, you can also get the Punishment with your Ecclesia. And then Punishment also can search extra pieces because you can once again dump a Herald and then search either one of them. And so you have so many cards within your engine that it's actually incredibly consistent despite looking sort of janky. Alright, so moving on to the extra deck. For the synchros, we've got 2 copies of Herald of the Arclight, 1 copy of Omega. Omega I think is necessary because for one, it helps you recycle your own cards, and so only having 2 copies of Herald is manageable because we can just shuffle them back and use them again. But also it can be a form of disruption, especially with DPE and so many decks this format. You just shuffle that back into the extra deck, and then that deals with that problem. So Omega is super useful. Then for the fusions, which we play a lot of, we have 2 copies of Intis, 2 copies of Titanclad, 2 copies of Apkalone, 2 copies of Winda, and then 1 Construct. Construct is sort of a flex spot in this deck, I think, as is the second Winda, but I definitely like them because of how powerful the Shaddolls engine is in general. Because again, you have Beast, which turns a lot of your cards like Construct and Apkalone into upstart goblins, but also Construct helps you deal with cards. Having Light and Dark means you can use Schism to send Light and Dark monsters to the grave. Apkalone can negate any card on the field, and having the multiple attributes helps you also summon the Apkalone. And so I definitely I enjoy the larger Shaddolls engine. Not engine, but package. Larger Shaddolls package. But that's it for the fusion monsters. And then finally we play a couple of link monsters. You've already seen 2. We play 1 copy of the Almirage, 1 copy of Secure Gardna, and then the 1 copy of Fairjit the Baron Blossom. And we've seen these 2. They're obviously useful, but Fairjit's good because you can just dump it to the graveyard with like a Nadir's Servant, a Maximus, a Punishment, and then get a draw off of that. And although you have to put a card back, it can be useful for fixing hands as well. Like let's say you have Sanctum plus Scythe in hand, you can send this to the graveyard, draw a card, put back the Sanctum, or put back the Scythe, then Sanctum summon it back out. So that's super useful. It also turns your Maximus into sort of Pot of Greed, because you can dump Apkalone's and send Beast, and then dump this as well. So you get the draw off of the Beast, and the draw off of this. So that's 2 draws off of 1 effect. I'll take that. That's pretty good, especially in games 2 and 3, when you can be drawing into your sided in cards that have even higher impact on the game. So I definitely like this copy of Blossom. But that's it for the extra deck. Let's move on to the side deck. For the side deck, we're playing 3 copies of Droll, 3 copies of Lancia, the extra 2 copies of Nib, and then 1 copy of Shaddolls Ariel for the monsters. Ariel I really like just because you can easily dump it to the graveyard with an Apkalone and disrupt your opponent's graveyard. We also play 3 copies of Evenly Matched for going second, and then 2 copies of Barrier, and then 1 copy of Trap Trick. I really like this ratio over playing 3 copies of Barrier because the Trap Trick can also function as a 4th copy of Sanctum or a 3rd copy of Punishment. And so being that it can get us any of these 3 normal trap cards, well, as well as evenly in some random case, it makes it extremely powerful. And so I definitely like this ratio a lot for the extra deck. But alright guys, that's pretty much it for this Dogmatika deck profile. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.